You're good?
We're live now.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Deputy Mayor Jim McMenamin. I'll be taking over tonight. The mayor had another item she had to take care of. So this is council meeting number 27, Wednesday, June 9th, 2021. 6:36 is our start time. Participation in the meeting. So Jessica, if you want to read that little blurb for us, thank you.
In light of the province-wide stay-at-home order, please be advised that the municipal center is currently closed to the public. The municipality remains operational to provide essential services and assistance to residents and businesses by virtual appointment only. Council meetings will be conducted virtually via Zoom. Council meetings will be live streamed on YouTube commencing at 6:30 p.m. To view the live stream, you can visit the YouTube link provided. For any member of the public wanting to attend the meeting virtually, pre-registration is required by emailing clerk@northgrenville.on.ca. To make a deputation in relation to an item on the agenda, please register with the clerk's office at the same email address. Please provide your comments no later than 2 hours prior to the start of the meeting. If you require accommodation, please advise the clerk when pre-registering so that we may best assist you. Subsequent to the live stream, the video will be archived on the North Grenville YouTube channel under the Playlists tab titled North Grenville Online Council Meetings. To view the archived video post-meeting, visit www.youtube.com/user/northgrenville/playlists.
Thank you, Jessica. Since this is a council meeting, the mayor usually likes to make a few quick announcements, so I'll add a few of my own. Of course, everybody on the call are going to be viewing this later on. You understand that June is Participation Month, and North Grenville is still in first place as the last time I checked in the province and across Canada. So the participants are doing a fantastic job across the municipality. I want to also put a big shout out to the Health, Wellness and Fitness Committee, who a couple of months before this whole thing got underway was doing the planning to get it going and making the calls and sending out emails to get everybody riled up. They're still doing a great job. They continue to put messages out. And so anyway, quite excited. It's an exciting time. It's going to be a great piece if we can win this, just bragging rights, I guess, and maybe some tourism traction because of it. That's about all I got, other than, of course, there's yard and leaf pickup I think it's this week, and bulky items next week are coming up. We've got lots of stuff on the calendar, so I would suggest people go to the North Grenville calendar and you can see all the activities, especially because of participation. There's something going on almost every day, so they can check that out. And I got under a good call from our Parks and Rec people that our pool will be opening on the 14th of June. That's next Monday. So they're doing the training and they're getting everything ready for the Monday. Councillor Doreen O'Sullivan, would you like to say something?
Thank you. Just a very good plug for participation, but there's more than bragging rights at stake here. It's $100,000 for our community if we are successful at being named the most active community in Canada. So some pretty good coin along with it.
Sure. The only catch is they're going to take the top 50 municipalities and cities across the country, and you have to write a letter to say why you deserve the $100,000. So it's not in the bag if we get the big numbers, but I'm okay just with the bragging rights. If we don't get the 100 Gs, that's okay, but we'll take it as well.
Of course.
Okay, so Jessica, you'd like me to move on to the serious part of the meeting, right? So I have to call the meeting to order. Okay. And the next item, of course, is approval of the agenda. So I'll need a mover or a seconder on that. Okay, I've got Councillor Strachan and O'Sullivan. I guess we still don't have Councillor Barkley yet. Okay. Disclosure of interest. Does anybody have anything they need to disclose? No. Okay, I see none. Okay, the next piece, presentations and delegations, we have none, I see. We have a consent agenda, and I'm supposed to read something there. Could you read that, Jessica? Because I don't have it in front of me.
The consent agenda is included in this meeting agenda. Does any council member request removal of a consent agenda item?
I see none.
Seeing no requests to remove an item from the consent agenda, the consent matters include item 1. And if there's no objections, these items will be approved. As there are no objections, these items are approved.
Thank you, Jessica. So the next is going right to our first report, I believe.
Sorry, just wanted to interject. There should be a motion for the approval of the consent agenda.
All right, so I'll need a motion and a seconder of that. I'll take Doreen O'Sullivan first and Kristen Strachan as number 2. All in favor? Good, it's passed. Okay, Pollock, I can move to the report.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, and I believe, Amy, you're going to be speaking on this one, so I'll let you take it on. Thank you very much.
It's a public meeting, so we'll need to open the public meeting.
Okay, right.
So council will now hold a virtual public meeting to consider an application to amend zoning for all lands located within the municipality of North Grenville pertaining to cannabis processing and production facilities. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Any persons who wish further notice of the council's decision concerning this matter should give their full names, address, and postal code to Amy Martin, Director of Planning and Development, via email following the adjournment of this public meeting. Contact information can be found on the notice of the public meeting and will be provided at the end of the presentation. Anyone wishing to ask a question during the public meeting can do so by using the raise hand feature on Zoom. When asking a question, please identify yourself and provide your address and postal code for the clerk to record as part of the public record. Are there any people here for this public meeting? If so, could you please acknowledge yourself through the raise hand feature on Zoom?
And to be clear, sorry, the first public meeting we're hearing is for the cannabis processing and production facilities zoning amendment. So it's the housekeeping amendment.
Correct.
Okay, seeing none, I will pass the meeting over to Amy Martin, Director of Planning and Development.
Perfect, thank you. Just wait for my slides to pop up here.
Sorry, my computer is going super slow today, but I'm getting that up for you in just a minute.
Yep, no,
Does everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Pollock. You can just move on to the next slide, please. So tonight we're considering a housekeeping amendment to comprehensive zoning bylaw 50-12 that will bring in provisions regarding cannabis production and processing facilities. Just a bit of a background as to how we got here. So in August 27th of 2019, council enacted an interim control bylaw to restrict the establishment of new cannabis production and processing facilities. And they directed staff to prepare a cannabis study in relation to cannabis facilities and land use planning. Almost a year later, on August 18th, council extended the interim control bylaw to allow for staff to continue to prepare the study, which came before council at the November planning meeting in November of 2020. As part of that process, council asked staff to develop a comprehensive public consultation piece around the cannabis study to gauge feedback from members of the community. So in March of 2021, we held virtual consultation, given our current COVID reality, to solicit feedback on the study from members of the public. The study was posted online for members of the public to review, and comments are to be directed towards myself. As well, we held a public information session on March 17th, where about 10 members of the public are able to come and ask questions and provide their direct feedback in an open discussion forum. And then here we are today, bringing forward the zoning provisions that are being recommended by staff that came out of the public consultation process and comments that were received on the study itself. Next slide, please. So the cannabis regulations that are being proposed from a zoning perspective underwent two processes. There was the public consultation process, but then there was also the land use review process. So looking at other municipalities, other guidelines, available at the provincial level, both being, how the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs deals with setbacks when it comes to certain uses, as well as the D6 series guidelines from the Ministry of Environment, all informing the analysis part of what was landed on as recommendations, which I'll get into a little later. I've kind of went over this already, so we can go to the next slide. I wanted to summarize the comments that were received as part of the public consultation process. So one of the items that was raised was we really need clear definitions for all cannabis production activities, including activities occurring at a smaller scale. So you'll see that the proposed zoning definitions reflect the fact of, there's the larger cannabis production facilities themselves, but Health Canada also licensed micro processing and micro cultivations facilities. So trying to address and ensure we cover off those areas as well. There was also the opinion from the public that we needed to take a stronger stance on where facilities are to be located and have stringent setback requirements from sensitive land uses. And again, defining sensitive land uses was part of this process as to what constitutes a sensitive land use. So the reductions of setback requirements, according to feedback from the public, should only be done through a zoning amendment to ensure a public process takes place. So for areas where you have a facility that is going through the rezoning process where they can't meet the 150-meter setback, that should be dealt with through a zoning bylaw amendment. The public was of the opinion that regardless of where you located a facility, odors would still be pervasive, even if the best technologies are implemented. They posed the question as to how many cannabis production facilities are too many within one municipality. And they indicated that they were more concerned about regulating the indoor growth of facilities compared to the outdoor growth of growing of cannabis. So in certain circumstances, especially in larger agricultural communities, you might find that farmers will plant an entire field with cannabis versus the indoor facilities, which are more automated. Next slide, please. So as part of the process, we reviewed the planning policy from the provincial level all the way down to the local level. So I've highlighted a few of the policies from each of our planning documents that we must have regard for, including the provincial policy statement. So the PPS provides overarching policy for growth and development across the province. And some of the policies include encouraging the management of land uses to achieve efficient and resilient development and land use patterns, address land use compatibility to avoid or minimize and mitigate any potential adverse effects from odors, noise, and other contaminants, ensure the long-term operational and economic viability of major facilities. And the PPS also supports the long-term economic prosperity of the province. Next slide, please. So under the PPS, we have the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville's official plan. So the United Counties official plan provides a high-level policy framework for development within the county itself, and that includes North Grenville. The policies within the United Counties official plan conform to the policies within the provincial policy statement. So as per section 2.6 of the United Counties OP, they encourage municipalities to designate and protect employment areas and to provide an appropriate mix and range of economic development activities and employment uses. It also encourages the location of new industrial facilities along major goods and movement facilities, such as Highway 416. And the county official plan also provides policies for rural industrial and agricultural activity, such that municipalities are to promote normal farm practices and protect the right to farm. Next slide, please. Underneath the United Counties official plan, we have the municipality's official plan. So the municipal official plan provides our policy framework for development in North Grenville. Some of our policies include encouraging the diversification of the local economy by attracting a wide range of businesses, including industrial and light manufacturing, establish policies for economic enterprise lands, which are to be developed for heavy commercial and industrial uses. And these lands are to be protected from incompatible land uses, such as residential uses. Economic enterprise lands are to support and facilitate opportunities for local job creation and the expansion and diversification of the local economy. Next slide, please. The Section 4 provides policies for rural lands, including rural industrial development, where we do permit agricultural processing plants, warehousing, and similar industrial uses. Typically, these uses serve the surrounding community. And we do have agricultural policies as well, which again supports that normal farm practices and promotes the diversification of the agricultural sector. Next slide, please. So I'm going to walk through the proposed zoning amendments. I'm not going to read the definitions out word for word. They're on the slide, but they're also available in the draft bylaw that was attached to the report. So these items were raised as part of the public consultation process as needing to define. So we're going to talk about setbacks from sensitive land uses in regards to air treatment control. So because of that, we've created a definition in the zone for the zoning bylaw that speaks to what exactly is air treatment control. I also took the time to define what is cannabis and what is not cannabis. So differentiating between cannabis and hemp. Next slide, please. And then the next few slides will go into the various definitions for cannabis facilities and cannabis-related activities, such as cannabis cultivation, cannabis micro-cultivation, micro-production. And I will note that these definitions are in relation to the different sub-licensing categories that Health Canada uses when issuing a cannabis license. So we're trying to follow the framework that Health Canada has in place for licensing to ensure that when we're defining a use, it's in line with how they define their uses their licensing category. Next slide, please. Cannabis production and processing facilities. We use the similar definition that was brought forward in the 2019 zoning bylaw amendment for ERA cannabis at 382 Town Line Road. In my professional opinion, having consistency with an existing facility within the municipality was important. And I know at that time, a lot of care went into how do you define that use. Next slide, please. And again, going into more of that definition as to what a cannabis greenhouse is defined as and cannabis nursery. One of the items that we added was a sensitive land use definition. This is not currently within our zoning bylaw. So when we start to talk about setbacks to sensitive land uses, I needed to ensure that we had a proper definition in which we could create that metric as to what is considered a sensitive land use. Next slide, please. So going through the zoning bylaw in regards to cannabis production and processing facilities, the big piece here is that cultivation and processing of cannabis is not permitted outdoors. So again, this is talking to an indoor facility. Staff are recommending a minimum setback of 150 meters from a sensitive land use if there's air treatment control and 300 meters if there is no air treatment control. Next slide, please. Again, trying to address some more of the site specifics. So typically we do allow for security structures for, especially when you have a site that's gated, to be located within the required minimum front yard. So just recognizing that that might be a mechanism of the site. Outdoor storage is prohibited on the property. Again, trying to keep the activity related inside the building. And then all development in relation to the establishment and expansion of a cannabis processing and production facility is subject to site plan control. And again, in our research and consultation with other municipalities in regards to cannabis facilities, it was highly stressed to ensure that site plan process was in place. And then it was very clear that these facilities would go through site plan control to address site specific conditions, whether it was not just the location of the building, but buffering, landscaping, fencing, lighting, all those elements that come into play when we're developing any industrial or heavy commercial type use. Next slide, please. In the proposed zoning bylaw, there's also recommendations as to the micro production, cultivation, and the nursery side of things. So this is recognizing the fact that these uses are typically smaller in scale and in what they're allowed to produce. So the proposed amendment, again, follows a lot of the provisions that are very similar to cannabis production facilities, but introduce a few more. And that includes, again, keeping the use within the facility itself, not permitting the outdoor cultivation, production, or storage, and establishing minimum lot areas. So for 4,000 square meters for a micro cannabis production or cultivation facility. Next slide, please. And again, speaking towards the need for air treatment control, and if it's not in place, the setback requirements are the same as what was proposed for the larger facilities for consistency. Next slide, please. And again, restricting the size of the facilities themselves, just to reflect that this is truly a small scale operation and it's not meant to be a large facility. And that's in line with provisions that we saw in other municipalities in regards to the micro production and micro cultivation facilities. And again, that requirement for site plan control. Next slide, please. I also addressed the agricultural zone and the outdoor growth of cannabis. So again, introducing some provisions to try and address the impact that it might have. So in certain cases, there might be associated buildings with the use. So again, trying to restrict the size and scale of those within the area where cannabis is being cultivated. And again, trying to put in more setback requirements, because typically where cannabis is being cultivated on a large agricultural plot, you'll have more room to accommodate any associated buildings or uses on the property. We would permit, through the proposed zoning regulations, cannabis within greenhouses, and I'm proposing a maximum of 4 greenhouses per operation. And again, trying to restrict building height. That's in line with our maximum building height in the rural and agricultural area. And again, trying to promote buffering and landscaping from outdoor cultivation to the to public roads and other properties. Next slide, please. Another piece in how we address where cannabis facilities are to be located. The recommendation within the zoning bylaw currently is to permit them within the economic enterprise or the C5 zone. So that's typically our lands that have more of that industrial use association. Within North Grenville, those lands are typically located within that 416 corridor. So again, supporting the policies within our policy documents that encourage these types of uses to be close to our goods movement corridors. Cannabis cultivation will be permitted in the Agriculture 1 and Agriculture 2 zones. So again, those are lands that are specifically identified for agricultural uses and are to be protected as such. And it's important to note that where a property is not zoned in accordance to permit any of the defined cannabis uses, a site-specific zoning amendment would be required to rezone the property to the corresponding zoning category where the use is permitted. So there's not a ton of properties within North Grenville that have that C5 zoning designation, but if there was a property within our economic enterprise lands, a property owner could apply to rezone a property really anywhere in the municipality, and that's where the regulations would come into place to say, if you're going to be establishing, here's what our expectations are. Next slide, please. So we did receive a comment, two comments that have come in as throughout the notification period for this public meeting. The first one I'd like to note came from the French School Board, and their recommendation and policy, I shouldn't say policy, sorry. So their recommendation was that there be a 1.5 kilometer setback from schools. And then we also received email, a list of questions regarding the proposed amendments on in regards to an existing cannabis facility within North Grenville that doesn't have the recommended zoning categories and has been in place. Some of the questions related to how would this impact their ability to expand in the future, and how do the regulations that are being proposed impact their current operation. Staff are preparing a fulsome response back to the person who had inquired and posed the questions as a way of trying to address how our proposed regulations would be impacted. In many cases, when we have an existing business or land use that is in existence prior to any zoning regulations come in place, they do enjoy some forms of legal non-conforming and legal non-complying status. But a fulsome response in light of those policies within our zoning bylaw will be provided back to the individual who sent their inquiry in. So at this time, I know it was quite a bit of a lot of talking, a lot of word and a lot of text on the screen. But as mentioned, staff took the time to consult with the public with the cannabis study, which, from an approach perspective, looked at what documents we have in place, at our different ministry partners, but as well as looked at other zoning regulations in other municipalities, and the proposed regulations before council tonight considered, what was common and consistent across Ontario, and what through the public consultation process works for North Grenville. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy Martin. That was a very fulsome description of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So thank you very much for that. I'll leave this now for Jessica to read, to open up to the public for questions.
Council will now hear questions or comments from members of the public who wish to comment either for or against the proposal. As persons wishing to address the proposal will ask their questions through the chair. Please state your full name and town or city in which you reside. Council members may also wish to ask questions through the chair to those making presentations. Please be advised that any member of the public who should wish to provide written comment regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment can still do so after the public meeting is adjourned. Written comment can be received up until the zoning bylaw amendment is considered by council. It is intended that the zoning bylaw amendment will be brought forward for consideration on June 9th, 2021.
Thank you, Jessica. So do we have any people from the public who want to speak on this project or this particular bylaw? Speak now, please, or put your hand up. Okay, Luke, I recognize you. You can, you've got a question, please go ahead.
Not necessarily a question. So we've sent some comments. I guess it was relating to like 1.5 kilometers from the CECC, which is the French Catholic School Board. We are, of course, somewhat concerned, but we expect that this municipality will make the right decision in regards to any tobacco, cannabis, and liquor production or sale around schools. So basically, that was our concerns. And I just got the information regarding the fencing around the building itself. That's 1.2 meters, which seems a little bit low, but again, stating back to the director and planning and development. Thank you very much. So that's about it. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Luke. Amy, can you expand on the 1.5 kilometers? I know you mentioned that, and can you also expand on this fencing or the security piece?
So the in regards to the 1.5 meter setback that came as a request from the French Catholic School Board, when I was doing my zoning analysis, I did not come across any provisions that asked for a larger setback from schools. What I will say is that the recommendation as to where these facilities should be located are within our industrial area, and there are no school facilities within that area. And when you think about where our schools are located, it would be, I mean, we do have quite a few up near the campus lands. But again, those are areas where we would have industrial lands where you would want to locate these facilities.
Okay, thank you. And the 1.5 kilometers are talking about the indoor facilities. We're not talking about the outdoor growing fields and those kind of things. Do we have a restriction on that as well, Amy?
There wouldn't be a restriction on the setback for, say, if a farmer was growing cannabis within their field to a sensitive land use. The zoning bylaw seeks to provide some buffering requirements from that. But again, that would, there's certain protections under the Right to Farm Act. But it's more so the facilities too, in the sense that, it's a continual operation and how, cannabis is produced versus a farm field, which is usually once a year where the field is cropped. So trying to avoid, that year-round production from being located near sensitive land uses is why we've recommended that these uses be located within industrial areas outside of the agricultural use.
So what I'm hearing is I don't think it would be challenging to put in this 1.5 kilometer buffer potentially like, I don't see a challenge there. Is there a challenge there to you going forward? Unless a school is maybe moved into the industrial area, maybe that could be a problem. I don't know. Where would the concern be?
I mean, the concern would be if we had a facility proposal around any of our schools, but where our schools are located, those, it'd be very unlikely that an application to rezone lands would be supported, because our schools are in our, more of our institutional areas and our residential areas. To implement that 1.5 meter setback based on where our industrial lands are located right now, okay. I don't personally see a need for it.
No, but it wouldn't be challenging to put it in, is what I'm saying. We're not really restricting too much. The chances of a school in this particular facility being within 1.5 kilometers or less sounds like it'd be very unlikely. So what I'm asking you, if we do put that provision in, and I'm just hypothetically saying, does it create any other challenges within this bylaw? Is, I guess, what I'm asking, if we grant this particular item.
I mean, for now, based on our geography, it wouldn't, but I don't overly see it as necessary. Like I mentioned, I did not come across any provisions when reviewing other municipal zoning bylaws that inputted an additional setback from a school. Okay.
And the other part of my question was about the fencing. I thought fencing was quite high around these facilities. Has something changed?
So that's a minimum recommendation. Fencing requirements, again, would, from a security perspective, would still have to meet the guidelines around Health Canada. But that 1.2 meter fencing was pretty common across many municipal bylaws. Yeah,
the feds have their own requirement for fencing, and all these facilities, my understanding, they all have to abide by it, and that's where we get that almost that prison look. Luke, it's very stringent, the rules. I doubt they're going to change, but okay. Thank you, Amy. Does anybody else from the public have a question? If nobody from the public, then I'll open it up to my council colleagues. I see Councillor O'Sullivan would like to ask a question or make a comment. Go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you, Amy, for that very fulsome presentation. I do have a couple of questions just to clarify for myself. When you said a maximum of 100 square meters of cultivation space, and that would also be a maximum of 4 greenhouses. So that would mean if they were maxing 250 square meters per greenhouse, which is only 33 feet by 82 feet. And visually, I can't put that into perspective, but I do believe the greenhouses I've been in at the Ferguson Forest Center were significantly bigger than that. So how would this impact any new facilities that we already have coming? Because I understand that one of the new facilities on Townline Road, for example, was hoping to expand to in the future. So does that mean that they are restricted as well, in spite of the high technology building that they're planning? So I just want to clarify, how does that 1,000 square meter limit affect businesses that we've already are going to welcome into North Grenville?
So those restrictions are more related to the smaller micro processing facilities that again, it's just another sub-license category of Health Canada. In regards to that facility on Townline Road, they've got a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment on their property to allow for that, and they are a larger scale. They would be defined as a cannabis production and processing facility, which there are no restrictions on the size of the building that are being proposed within the current zoning bylaw.
Okay, thank you. And so in terms of people growing outside, like just personal use growing outside, not that I have any, but I'm just curious about that, because you mentioned no outdoor growing, but this is only for the micro commercial facilities, correct?
So it's for the larger scale and the micro production facilities as defined by Health Canada and in the proposed regulations. As for the personal growth, the definition for cannabis processing and production facilities is explicitly exempts that. That's a totally different, we will not be regulating that through zoning. that's regulated elsewhere through other laws.
Okay, thank you very much.
Council colleagues, does anybody else have a question? Councilor Barkley?
Yeah, not a question. I just like to make a comment and thank Ms. Martin for a well-researched report and some very thoughtful and considered recommendations. I know it's been a long time coming, but I think what we're left with is giving businesses who are looking to establish production and processing facilities here in North Grenville a lot of clarity about what we would be looking for should they choose to set up business here. So thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, Luke, did you have a follow-up for us? Okay, so we're going to move ahead here. I'm going to suggest to my council colleagues that there's a little bit more research that Ms. Martin wanted to do, and we had a discussion prior to this meeting a little bit about that, and that would be to defer this particular bylaw until she does her further research on the question when it comes to basically the one existing facility that we do have, and then report back to us. And I probably would like to say too, that maybe the request for the 1.5 kilometer be not included, but researched or discussed further so that I have better understanding why or why not we would add that. Okay, so that's just my recommendation right now. And I see Councillor Strachan has a question or comment, and I'll let you go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think that I wasn't quick enough getting my hand up earlier. I'm inclined to agree with you on that, the 1.5 kilometers. I think that it's worthy of consideration. You know, I understand, Director Martin, that perhaps other municipalities haven't included that, and you know, maybe haven't found had a need to, or have had other geographic considerations that were at play. But I think that given what our community has as far as where the schools are and where the zoning for permitted facilities are located, I think that considering that would be good as well. I guess also regarding the fencing, I know that we have a minimum requirement on that. 1.2 meters is really low. And I'm just wondering if perhaps we could consider either matching what the minimum standard is for the federal government, or doing something that's in line with them, knowing that that would be the requirement for those facilities anyway, rather than going much lower and have it be completely out of sync. So perhaps there's a piece there that we can consider as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strachan. And I would agree with that particular statement. I was thinking about the 1.2. If the federal rules would change in the future for whatever reason, we may not be happy with that. I don't know. So let's put that in, Amy, as a comment to do a little bit more research on that piece and come back to us, with your recommendations. But I can't see the harm in either matching what the feds are doing now. But again, if the feds change, that means our rules will change, or maintaining whatever the current standards are that the feds have. That we would have that into the future, unless somebody changes it, of course. But if you could do a little background on that for us, that would be much appreciated.
So before we move into a motion to refer this item, I'm just going to state that the public meeting is closed.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And would you like me to read a motion to refer the zoning bylaw amendment?
Yes, please.
Okay. That council refers zoning bylaw amendment 0520 cannabis production and processing facilities to the July 14 council meeting date.
Sounds good. Is that doable, Amy?
Yes, it is.
Okay, can I get a motion for that and a seconder? Councillor O'Sullivan and Councillor Barkley, since we haven't got him yet. All in favor? See no objections, so that's moved. That's carried. Okay. So we are going into our second public meeting, and Jessica, you'll take that on for me. Thank you.
Council will now hold a virtual public meeting to consider an application for lands legally described as Bedell Road from institutional agriculture, special exemption A1-10 to permit the construction of a single-family dwelling and reduce the minimum required setback from a principal railway. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. And if appellant does not provide comments at this public meeting or written submissions before council adopts the proposed amendment, the local planning appeal tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Any persons who wish further notice of the council's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to Amy Martin, Director of Planning and Development, via email following adjournment of this public meeting. Contact information can be found on the notice of public meeting and will be provided at the end of the presentation. Anyone wishing to ask a question during the public meeting can do so by using the raise hand feature on Zoom. When asking a question, please identify yourself and provide your address and postal code for the clerk to record as part of the public record. Are there people here for this public meeting? If so, could you please acknowledge yourself through the raise hand feature? Thank you. I will now pass the meeting over to Ms. Martin, Director of Planning and Development.
All right, thank you. So our second application being considered tonight is an applicant-driven application. The property is located on Bedell Road. It doesn't have a civic number, so I'm going to refer to the mapping as a way of locating where the property is. Next slide, please. So the property is located, it's on Bedell Road, just west of Bedell. It's on the part of the road that kind of snakes around there as an S curve. It's on the south side of the CP rail line. Next slide, please. And as you can see, the property is currently forested. And again, it's just located abutting the railway there on Bedell. Next slide, please. And here's the drawing that the applicant had submitted as part of their application. So a few things to note is that the frontage of the lot is under 100 meters wide. Our zoning bylaw requires a minimum of 100 meters setback from principal railways. So to start off, the property was constrained from a development perspective and trying to meet that setback. These lands were originally part of the overall Kemptville campus lands. This portion and the 14-acre piece that's located on the west side of Bedell Road directly across from this property, the province held onto and have recently gone through the process to sell. So the applicant is proposing to rezone the lands from the institutional zone, again, associated with the campus lands, to the agricultural exception zone to permit him to construct a single detached dwelling on the property with a future accessory structure. And the zoning bylaw amendment is also addressing the requirement to seek that setback reduction from the principal railway from 100 meters to 30 meters. And again, that's to give him some flexibility in where he can position his house on the property. And as you will see, that 30-meter setback actually does create quite a large area where they can't develop because of the proximity to the CP rail line. Through the proximity guidelines published by FCM for proximity to railways, 30 meters is the minimum setback that they recommend from the railway for residential uses. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, the application is to rezone the property from the institutional zone to the agriculture 1 exception zone. The underlying designation of the property within the official plan is agriculture. So as per our policies, we are to ensure that when we are considering rezonings that we match the underlying land use designation. The agriculture zone does permit a single detached dwelling as a permitted use. As mentioned, these lands were originally part of the overall campus lands, which is why they have had that institutional zoning, and it's not zoned agriculture. And then rezoning the property would permit the development of the single detached dwelling and reduce the minimum required setback from 100 meters to 30 meters. And again, those proximity guidelines were referenced when considering the minimum required setback from the railway. We did not receive any comments from any members of the public in regards to this application. I don't think that there was any much concern regarding the fact that the individual just wants to establish a single detached dwelling on the property. Next slide, please. So it is our recommendation that Council enact bylaw 6321 to amend the zoning bylaw to permit these lands to be rezoned to permit the development of the property as requested by the applicant. Next slide, please. And if there, that's the end of my formal presentation, and I am here to take questions.
Jessica, do we have another statement?
Council will now hear from the applicant, followed by questions or comments from members of the public who wish to comment either for or against the proposal. Following any comments from the public, the applicant will be offered an opportunity to respond to questions raised. All persons wishing to address the proposal will ask their questions through the chair. Please state your full name and town or city in which you reside. Council members may also wish to ask questions through the chair to those making presentations. Please be advised that any member of the public who should wish to provide written comment regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment can still do so after the public meeting is adjourned. Written comment can be received up until the zoning bylaw amendment is considered by council. It is intended that the zoning bylaw amendment will be brought forward for consideration on June 9th, 2021.
Thank you, Jessica. So I don't think we had any public that want to speak on this, but I'll open it up in case somebody does. I don't see any takers. Do my council colleagues have questions? Councillor O'Sullivan, I'll let you go ahead. You're on mute, Councillor O'Sullivan.
Sorry, just want to clarify, when I look at the hand-drawn sketch, there's a rectangle piece that has the house and a garage and the word cleared on one end, and the 30 meter looks like it goes from the CP rail to the far eastern portion of the rectangle, but the lot in question is like a triangle. So I'm a little confused about if it has to be 30 meters from the CP rail to the house, like where this isn't clear. Is the lot rectangular or is the whole lot the triangle? And what's with the rectangular piece?
That's
So
the
the
house. Oh, sorry, Amy, I'll let you take it on. Maybe you can throw that map back up again, because I see that the corner was cut off, but I'm assuming it's just a hand drawn, that when he officially gets ready for the site plan or whatever, it'll have to be comply with that 30 meters right to the tip of that house. So if you want to show that.
Yeah, I'll quickly speak to the drawing. So that rectangular area that the applicant has drawn is just showing the area that he's intending to clear of trees, because it is a tree lot. To facilitate the development of his house. That 30 meter setback, that's the minimum requirement from any structure on the property. So as you can see, he's proposing to push it out a little more, but wanted to be sure that he had adequate room to construct his house. He intends to leave a treed buffer between his house and the railway as a way of providing that additional noise attenuation from the railway itself. But that, I mean, it's just the way he's drawn it is just to show that cleared area where his development will be located.
Okay, thank you. So it's 125 feet deep and 325 feet wide. And so from where the house will actually be would be more than 30 meters away from the CP rail. Okay. All right.
Based on this drawing, yeah. Okay, Councillor Strachan, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess related to that minimum setback from the rail line. So the current setback is 100 meters. I can guess as to why it's 100 meters, but I'm asking, I guess, for your clarification on what 100 meters means in that and what it means to go down to 30 meters. Was it set for any particular reason at 100 meters?
So this question's come up a few times in the past 2 years. how did that 100 meters make its way into the zoning bylaw? So in 2012, the zoning regulations were amalgamated between the various municipalities within North Grenville into the comprehensive zoning bylaw. My understanding is that the provisions I think originated in South Gore, made their way into the zoning bylaw, whereas previous under the, if we were under the old, Oxford on Reno zoning bylaw, this wouldn't even be a consideration. We've seen applications, and again, the 30-meter setback it comes from the proximity guidelines that's published by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in conjunction with the railways to try and promote those development standards. So in our case, it was just kind of a historical zoning that was carried over from previous bylaws that made its way in. But we do have examples kind of more in the recent history of, from a zoning and a minor variance perspective where we have allowed for a reduction on lots of record where that 100-meter setback completely sterilized a lot from development.
Mhm.
And in this case, I mean, the maximum width of the front of that lot on Bedell Road is around 80 meters, and then it shrinks as it goes back. So this the zoning bylaw amendment recognizing, that minimum of 30 meters ensures that he can still build a house, and then that protection there with the existing tree line is that noise attenuation buffer.
Okay, so yeah, I appreciate the shape of the property definitely factors into this, and that makes a big difference. So from what I'm hearing, what you're saying, 30 meters is not unusual or unheard of for a minimum setback, and the 100 meters is probably more of the exception, I guess. Or in our case, it was the greater of the two, or greater of the bunch, whatever it was, that was chosen to be put into the zoning bylaw. Is that a rough approximation of what you just said?
Yeah, and that's
Okay.
my understanding, and doing that review on our previous bylaws to understand how did 100 meters make its way in. But there are many examples in our zoning where that setback is less.
Yeah,
Okay.
Amy, I believe
Thank
a recent example, it was the one on Scotch Line Road, which we approved months ago. I guess I can't remember exactly, but it was a similar type of lot. The rail, it was a triangle piece, but I think they had to go down to a 30-meter. And I suspect actually that one, if I remember correctly, was even tighter. It was 30 meters to the house. For this one has a further buffer based on the drawing, anyways. Okay.
Your
Is there
memory
any
is
other
better
questions?
than mine, Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Okay.
I think on the same, on the other side, on the north side of this rail line, if you go a little further west, there is probably 5 or 6 homes at the end of Victoria Park that are backing onto the railway, and they are probably 30 meters at the most away from the railway, the homes, the actual house.
Okay, if council colleagues, you have any other questions, any concerns in the public who wants to speak up now? No? Okay, Jessica?
Seeing none, this public meeting is closed, and we can go into the resolution. Would you like me to read that?
Sorry, yes, go ahead.
Be it resolved that council approve and enact bylaw 6321, amending bylaw 5012, being a bylaw to regulate the use of land and use of buildings and structures within the municipality of North Grenville, to amend the zoning for the lands located at Bedell Road, concession 3, part of lots 23 and 24, and concession 4, part of lots 24 to 28, from institutional to agriculture 1, special exemption A1-10.
Thank you. I'll need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Barkley and Councillor O'Sullivan. All in favor? Carried. Okay, Jessica, number 3.
So council will now hold a virtual public meeting to consider an application for lands legally described as 3770 Rideau River Road from rural special exemption RU 58 to permit an oversized accessory structure with the secondary dwelling located in the upper story. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If an appellant does not provide comments at this public meeting or written submissions before council adopts the proposed amendment, the local planning appeal tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Any persons who wish further notice of council's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to Amy Martin, Director of Planning and Development, via email following adjournment of this public meeting. Contact information can be found on the notice of public meeting and will be provided at the end of the presentation. Anyone wishing to ask a question during the public meeting can do so by using the raise hand feature on Zoom. When asking a question, please identify yourself and provide your address and postal code for the clerk to record as part of the public record. Are there any people here for this public meeting? If so, could you please acknowledge yourself through the raise hand feature on Zoom? I believe possibly Miss Lamb.
Ms. Lamb, did you have a comment to make, or? Okay, we'll let Amy go through this first, and then we'll see if there's any comments after that.
Perfect. Our last application tonight is for 3770 Rideau River Road. We'll just go to the next slide, please there, Pollock. So the property is located on Rideau River Road, or County Road 19. It's on the northern stretches of North Grenville, and it's located on the Rideau River. Next slide, please. As you can see from the aerial, it's a little zoomed out, but the property is currently developed with a single detached dwelling on the lot, and it's quite treed in the front and kind of on the north side of the property. Next slide, please. So the applicant's proposing to construct a residential accessory structure on the property. So the main level of the accessory structure would be a garage space and storage area for the existing single detached dwelling on the property. And they're proposing to utilize the upper story as a secondary dwelling unit. Our current zoning bylaw provisions permit a secondary dwelling unit within the principal dwelling, but there are currently no provisions for secondary dwelling units within an accessory structure. Next slide, please. So the zoning being sought tonight would create an exception zone on the property for two purposes. The current zoning bylaw restricts residential accessory structures to a maximum footprint of 100 square meters. And again, as I mentioned, we do not currently have provisions to permit secondary dwelling units within an accessory structure. So we do deal with them on a case-by-case basis currently from a zoning perspective. It is currently developed, being the property, as a single detached dwelling, and it's designated as rural and floodplain as per Schedule A of the official plan. The proposed structure itself is to be just over 2,400 square feet. The upstairs will be about 2,100 square feet, and that's the area that would be used as the secondary dwelling unit on the property. Next slide, please. Our official plan currently does have policies that permits a secondary dwelling unit within an accessory residential structure, as long as there is not a secondary dwelling unit located within the primary residence or the principal residence. In this case, there currently is not a secondary dwelling unit in the principal residence. As mentioned, we do have provisions for secondary dwelling units within our principal dwelling, however, not within accessory structures. This is currently being reviewed, and a global housekeeping amendment will be forthcoming to council to provide more general zoning provisions for secondary dwelling units within those accessory structures. The proposed secondary dwelling unit is just under 40% of the gross floor area of the existing principal dwelling. So those are the metrics that we have within our zoning provisions. And a key piece here is that it is located outside of the floodplain. So there's significant area closer to River Road that would allow for more development. The necessary approvals have been obtained from the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority as the development is within their 120-meter regulatory area. So typically that's the 120 meters out from the boundary of the river. Next slide, please. Staff did not receive any comments from any members of the public. And as mentioned, the RVCA has provided their approvals required for the development. and there will be a requirement for septic approvals through the health unit. So they have provided that they had no concerns or objections to the proposal. So staff are recommending at this time that we move forward with approving bylaw 6421 to amend the zoning bylaw to permit the oversized accessory structure with a secondary dwelling unit in the upper story.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Barton. Do we have any questions at this point from the public? Seeing none, do my council colleagues have questions or comments to make about this particular property? None? Okay. I guess we have a motion, Jessica, there.
So we're just going to close the public meeting.
Yep.
And it resolved that council approve and enact bylaw 6421, amending bylaw 5012, being a bylaw to regulate the use of land and use of public buildings and structures within the municipality of North Grenville, to amend the zoning for the lands located at 3770 Rideau River Road from rural to rural special exemption, to permit an oversized accessory structure with a secondary dwelling unit located in the upper story.
Thank you. Could I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Barclay and Councillor Strakian. All in favor? All in favor? So carried. Thank you. Is there anything else, Jessica, other than closing this up?
So we have no informational reports, no correspondence, notice of motions, introduction and considerations of bylaws. We have reviewed all of the bylaws. Bylaw 6121 and 6221 are being referred. 6321 and 6421 have passed. This is now the period for questions from the public and media related to the agenda items.
Hey, Jessica, you mentioned the 6421. Are you using a terminology referred or deferred? Just
so the official terminology is refer for 6121 and 6221, and those are for the cannabis.
2 years in, I'm learning something every day. Okay, thank you.
I learned it today too.
Okay. So we'll open this up then to the public and the media. If they have questions or comments they'd like to make, this is your time. Looks like it's a quiet night. Everybody's out running and doing their participation minutes, so they don't want to talk to us. Okay, Jessica, I guess we're going to move on.
Okay, so closing of the meeting, the confirmation bylaw, that bylaw 6521 to confirm the proceedings of council at its regular meeting held on June 9th, 2021 be adopted and passed.
Okay, I'll need a motion for that. Councillor O'Sullivan and Councillor Strakian, all in favor? Carried.
And resolution to adjourn, that the regular meeting of council adjourn at 7:38 p.m.
Okay, I'll need a motion for that. Councillor O'Sullivan and Councillor Barclay. All in favor? So moved. So that's it. We're closing the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for the public. I don't think we have very many left, but have a great evening. Bye for now.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night. Bye.